Hi everyone, this is Dave. Thought I'd come on before this episode and give you fair warning. This episode deals with some sensitive adult subject matter. Without giving too much away, we cover the subject of rape. We'll have some resources after the episode, but fair warning, listener discretion is strongly advised. By the Fire presents A Desperate Soul by Dave Smale. Read for you by the author. Chapter 22. Confession Time. Talitha trembled. Her parents stared at her, then at each other, then back at her. Tears pooled in her eyes. She sobbed and began. "All right, so this is what happened. You both knew how Bean, Oscar, used to be infatuated with me back in high school?" Billy and Taylor both nodded. "Well, you don't know the whole story. Oscar, you know what? I'm just gonna call him Bean. It's easier. Anyway, Bean was a bad boy. With a soft side he claimed only I could bring out of him. He'd write me little notes, poems, name stars after me, things like that. He had this mean image, but he was actually a hopeless romantic. I was a typical teenage church kid. I'd go because you expected it of me, but I didn't really want to be there. To me, the world was more interesting than the church. I figured I was missing out. So, I totally wanted to say yes when Bean asked me out. I loved the attention he gave me, and I got this strange sense of value because apparently I was the only one who could tame him. But I knew you guys would never go for it unless he was saved. So I told him he had to come to church and make a good impression on you, 'cause you guys were old-fashioned like that. I figured he'd come and put on a show and you'd like him, and then we'd start dating. Then, as soon as I turned 18, we'd get married and get out of this town. I had it all planned out. But then he came to church and actually got saved. Then he started living for God, started going to Bible studies and evangelizing. He even started that church band. He was totally turned off to me. I got so mad. I started dating another guy in the church just to get him to notice me again." "You talking about Ryan?" Billy said. "Yeah, I didn't even like him. But my plan worked. Bean started kind of liking me again. But kind of wasn't enough for me. I wanted him to be head over heels, like he was before. I started flirting with him subtly whenever I could. It piqued his interest. He started writing poetry again, and I loved it. I started playing hard to get, since I was still dating Ryan. One night after a church concert that he performed in, I pulled him aside and I told him that I loved his music and his lyrics. I said he should start a band, but not a church-based band. Basically, all I wanted was Bean the way he used to be, back before he knew Jesus. And that's what I got. He became jealous of Ryan. He'd text me at all hours of the night, professing his love for me. I told him I was definitely leaving the church when I turned 18, maybe even sooner. Then I'd totally go out with him. He said... Talitha choked on emotions. She took a breath and then continued. He said he'd wait for me. I encouraged him to go start a real band. So he set out to do it. And that was when he left? Billy asked. Talitha nodded. So he left because of you? Asked Taylor. Yeah, but it's worse than that. His mom, she was so excited about how he'd changed. She said he was out of control before he came to church, but after he left, he was worse, way worse. She pleaded with him not to leave, not to go back to the way he used to be. So he left her house, just disappeared. Yep, I remember, Billy said. His mother would call me worried sick. I knew where he was. We stayed in contact, but it was limited. Since he was still a minor, he was considered a runaway, so we had to keep our contact to a minimum. Plus, I was still dating Ryan. It felt like Ryan was going to propose to me at any time. He didn't, and I was glad. I did not want to say yes. He was a good guy and all, but I liked Bean. So where did he go? I mean, no one could find him, but you knew where he was? Billy asked. Bean stayed with some of his friends for a while, his old friends. Eventually, he got a job at the record store. Then he got an apartment and then started a band. Not the one he's in now, a different one. One day he texted me and invited me to an after party at his apartment. I lied to you guys and told you I was going to a teen ministry thing that they were doing at the church that night. Then I would be spending a night at a friend's house. But instead I went to Bean's apartment. Billy shook his head. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. Listen, you don't have to keep going, Taylor said. I think we can guess how this ends. No, Mom. I need to, she said bluntly. I need to say it, and you guys need to hear it. Billy gestured for her to continue. Taylor huffed uncomfortably. There were all these weird people when I got to his apartment. I'd never actually been to a party like that before, and it scared me. I dressed up as goth as I could. I knew being like that. But looking around at everyone, I knew I wasn't like them, and I didn't want to be like them. There were girls stumbling around drunk and high, wearing almost nothing. One of them was hanging all over Bean. I knew right then he'd lied to me. He wasn't waiting for me. I had gotten in over my head. I tried to leave, but before I could, Bean saw me, and he blocked me from leaving. I told him I needed to go, but he was already drunk. He started using his words on me, telling me he was so glad to see me and how beautiful I was and how much he'd missed me. He said he wanted to be with me forever and all that. I knew deep down he was lying, but I really wanted to believe him. The party was so loud. Oh my gosh, so loud. So he coaxed me into his bedroom so we could talk. I was so nervous. So he offered me a drink. I had never had alcohol before. I remember how bad it tasted. I started feeling all lightheaded, and he started kissing on me. But when he started trying to get my clothes off, I resisted. He started, "Stop! Stop!" Taylor said. "We get it." Talitha trembled. Her voice became shaky. "No, Mom. No, you don't. Just listen." He started getting forceful. I resisted. I finally broke free. and I tried to run out of his room. But he grabbed me, and he pulled me back really hard. I remember flying through the air and hitting my head on something. Next thing I knew, I woke up on his floor in the middle of the night. All my clothes were off, and he was asleep in his bed. Taylor slammed her fist on the table, startling everyone. "Dear God!" she cried. "Honey," Billy said, "I know this is hard to hear. It's also hard for her to tell it. Just let her finish." Talitha thought for a moment, regaining her place in the story. "My head was pounding. I didn't know exactly what had happened. I found my clothes, put them on, and left. The place was so quiet then. So many people were passed out all over the place. I slept in my car that night. Barely. I had this huge bump on my head. Probably a concussion. I got home the next morning and..." Talitha paused. Her fists were clenched. "I remember feeling so filthy, so ashamed. Bean got all hostile when I called him and questioned him about it. He wouldn't discuss it. He called me all kinds of names. Slut, whore, you name it. After that, he stopped taking my calls and wouldn't respond to my texts. A couple weeks went by, and I was late for my period. I picked up a pregnancy test, and sure enough..." Tears filled Talitha's eyes. Billy handed her a napkin, with which she dabbed her tears. He refilled her water glass. Taylor sobbed and trembled, pinching the bridge of her nose. Talitha took a deep breath and continued. "I didn't know what to do. I was too scared to tell you guys about it. So I told Ryan that I'd been raped, but not who'd done it, and not that I was late. He asked, but I said I didn't want to talk about it. Jeez, he was so graceful and forgiving. Anyway, I asked him to take me to a women's health clinic. I lied, saying the whole thing had just happened a couple nights earlier when really it was a couple weeks earlier. I said I just needed a rape kit so I could file a police report. He believed me. Of course, instead of a kit, I walked into that clinic and had an abortion. I thought I felt ashamed before, but I really felt ashamed after that. Ryan kept asking if I'd filed the police report. I kept stalling, making excuses. I think he sensed I was either too afraid or lying about the whole thing. So, he said he'd take me to file the report. I was like, no way. That really upset him, so he said he was going to tell you guys everything. I panicked. I begged him not to. Made him promise that he wouldn't. Of course, he agreed. Then I texted Bean and said I was going to file a police report. That was on a Saturday. He didn't respond. Instead, he showed up to church the next day. Oh yeah, I remember, Billy chimed in. The day he got arrested. Right. Remember how he pretended to get saved again? Talitha asked. Billy nodded. Taylor was too upset to react. Afterward, he came up to me and threatened me. He said if I went to the police, he'd kill me. Talitha looked up and met her father's eyes. Now he was trembling. You thought he was trying to ask me out, so you told him to leave, remember, Dad? Billy nodded, despondently. He'd been fooled, and had been under a false assumption ever since. Talitha's eyes swung to her mother. Taylor's head was propped on her hands. She stared at the table as if examining each wood grain. Talitha continued. I couldn't keep the secret anymore after that huge scene. I mean, Bean started yelling that I was a whore in front of everyone. I had no choice. I had to tell Ryan it was Bean who had done it." She paused. Her bottom lip quivered. "Ryan said he was going to propose to me until I told him about the rape." A tear rolled from her cheek to the table. She sniffled. "I think eventually he still would have. He was so forgiving. But later I told him about the abortion." Talitha choked on the words. "He was so heartbroken. I've never seen a guy cry like that." Her face scrunched with sorrow, and she sobbed. Several seconds passed before she was able to continue. "Ryan, he'd had enough. Who could blame him? He couldn't bring himself to look at me anymore, much less come to the church. He couldn't get over the fact that I'd lied to him so many times. He was saving himself for our wedding day. He was such a good guy," Talitha wailed. "What's wrong with me? I'm so stupid!" Talitha suddenly hurled her full water glass. It shattered against the wall in the next room as Taylor screamed. Hi everybody, this is Dave again, coming on at the end of the show as promised to give you a resource concerning sexual violence and sexual assault. Let me first say that if you've experienced anything like that, a rape, a sexual assault, please do not stay silent. You need to tell somebody. I want to recommend a resource called RAINN. That's RAINN. They are the nation's largest sexual assault resource. So after a sexual assault, it's hard to know how to react. You might be physically hurt, emotionally drained, not sure what to do next. You might be considering working with criminal justice, or you might not know where to start at all. So I want to recommend rainn.org. That's RAINN.org. And you can reach them at their website or by dialing 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-HOPE. Learning more about what steps you can take following sexual violence can really help ground you in a difficult time. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to say thanks again for listening to By the Fire. Hey, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would you do me a favor and leave me a review? Please be honest. Don't give me 5 stars if I don't deserve it. If you're not listening on Apple, would you head over to podchaser.com, search for By the Fire with Dave, you'll find me, and leave me a review there. I'd really appreciate it. You can follow us on social media, Instagram and Facebook at By the Fire with Dave, Parler at author Dave Smale, MeWe, search for By the Fire with Dave, Twitter? Yeah, I don't do Twitter. Is that on purpose? Yep. Or you can send me an email, info@davesmale.com. Got some exciting announcements coming. Be looking for an invite to my email newsletter, which, if you sign up, you'll get my free novella, Safe House. Again, that's coming soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And I'll keep you up to date, don't worry. Also, did you know you could support this podcast? If you go to anchor.fm/bythefirewithdave/support, you can make a generous donation. And don't worry, as I've said before, any donation you make to this show, I am not going to keep one dime of it. And you can read all about that in the show notes. Thank you so much again for listening to By the Fire. God bless.
Hey, it's Jacob. I'm not a real rock star, but I might loosely be based on the author, who's also not a rock star. Hey, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and tell you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about it, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First off, it's free. Also, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast, like right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast so it can be heard on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership, and it's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm right now to get started.
This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.